Hi everyone, this is Rambutan here. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about one of the most strangest, the most difficult, physically painful, emotionally irritating, intellectually confusing experiences I've had in my life, which was my 10-day Vipassana course. I want to say right at the beginning that this is not going to be a video where I say Vipassana changed my life or no one should do Vipassana. This is not that kind of video because my experience was much more complicated than that. I think when something as intense as 10 days of silence, of isolation and meditation, of body pain and constant confrontation with your own mind, I think it deserves to be spoken with honesty. Again, this is not a universal judgment on Vipassana. This is not me saying that what I felt is what everyone will feel. And this is also not me denying that many people genuinely find it transformative. I know people who speak about Vipassana with a gratitude. But for me, it was not peaceful in any way that people often describe peace. It was difficult. It was very painful. It was lonely. It taught me things about my body, about my hunger, about my mind, about my need to write and my need for community, and also my discomfort with authority, with ideology, and any one framework that claims to explain too much of human suffering. I want to structure this properly. Why I went to Vipassana, what happened when I reached, what the daily routine was like, what the silence did to me, what physical pain did to me, what the evening discourses felt like to me, and how my mind started behaving by the middle of the course. What happened when the silence was lifted, and what I actually took away from those 10 days. The reason I went for Vipassana was that after my first corporate job, I was completely fried. I had finished my MA, entered my first corporate job, and within 2.5 months, I was exhausted. I was completely gone. Corporate space felt like a place where my nervous system was constantly failing, where I was trying to perform normalcy and productivity while something inside me was collapsing. I had great difficulty working in that environment, and very quickly I quit. And after quitting, I had this feeling that my brain was not just tired but burnt from the inside, completely burnt out, as if too much noise had entered it, and I needed a break from expectations, from people, from failure, everything. Around that time, I had a cousin who used to speak about Vipassana a lot, and he spoke about it with this sense of admiration. This 10-day meditation course had done so much important stuff for him, and because I was already in Hyderabad then, I was looking for something that would feel like a reset. I thought, oh, maybe what I need is not a vacation but 10 days of silence somewhere away from the city. Most Vipassana centers, at least from what I understood then, tend to be outside the main rush of cities. First thing I did was I applied online. I filled the form, gave the information they asked for. I waited for confirmation. And when the day came, I took my bike and left for the center. I had no idea what I was entering into. Of course, I had read some information and people had told me some things, but reading that you will be silent for 10 days and actually entering a space where silence becomes the law of your body are two completely different things, because outside silence is a choice, but inside silence becomes the norm. When I reached, the first thing was registrations, documents, and everything. They asked about my health issues, which I thought was important because this course is physically and mentally demanding. And I told them about my severe back pain. Even then, I had back pain, and I still do. And that mattered because sitting for long hours was already going to be difficult for me. Then they ask you to deposit your phone, wallet, writing materials, books, any outside distractions, because the whole structure is built around cutting you off from ordinary stimulation. I want you to imagine this. There is no phone, no books, there is no writing, no entertainment, no outside communication. You can't talk to fellow students. You can't make any eye contact also. No gestures, no social life. Once you enter that structure space, you're given a room. And in my case, I had a roommate. The room itself was very clean and spacious, and basic arrangements were fine. The food was good. The place had order. The volunteers were doing their work very well. The first day you land, the course begins. I think the noble silence begins, and in the noble silence, you are not supposed to communicate with other participants through speech, through gestures, through eye contact, written notes, nothing. And I do not think I fully understood then how much of my everyday life depends on tiny acknowledgements until those acknowledgements were removed. Normally what happens is when we pass someone, we smile, we nod, or we make eye contact and we say hi, how are you, did you eat. We try to make small talk just to confirm that both of us exist in the same social world. But in that space in Vipassana, even that was gone, and what remains is very strange, because you are surrounded by people, you see the same people every day, the same group of people meditating, you hear their footsteps, you sleep in the next bed to them, but you cannot make them into companions. In my batch, from what I remember, there were maybe around 80 or 200 people, with a mix of Indians and white foreigners. There are also old, retired people, people around my age in their early and mid 20s. Men and women had separate living quarters, separate sections. And from what I understood, men and women were completely separated outside the meditation hall. Coming back on the arrival day, you are given basic instructions, you are introduced to this routine. You are also told in some form that this is going to be serious work, not a 10-day relaxation package where you go into nature and come back glowing. And I want to stress this because many people have a very Instagram idea of meditation. You sit somewhere, you close your eyes, you breathe in deeply, you become peaceful and come back as a soft heeled cottage core person. But this was not that. On the very first evening, I made one mistake, which is also very me. I took a nap after reaching. I missed the bell, or did not properly understand the bell system. And because of that, I missed whatever food was given at that time. My first night became extremely difficult because there was no dinner and I had to sleep hungry. And that was not going to be the first night that I would be sleeping hungry in these 10 days. That first night, I remember tossing and turning because of hunger, because of the shock of the place. No phone, the presence of a roommate I could not talk to, and this strange awareness that I had voluntarily entered a structure where my usual escape routes had been taken away. And then at 4 a.m. in the morning, the bell comes. I still remember the sound of the bell. I expected a gentle, romantic bell where birds are singing and you wake up like a monk in a movie, but it was a loud, almost disciplinary sound outside your room. I opened the room and there was this attendant with a literal bell in hand, and you woke up groggy and hungry, and somehow you have to get ready and go for meditation. By 4:30, the first meditation starts, the first meditation session, and for the first few days the practice is anapana. It's called anapana, where you observe the breath and focus attention around the area of your nostrils. And the idea explained here is to increase concentration and awareness before moving into the Vipassana technique, which will be introduced in the fourth day. The whole instruction here is not relayed through people but through speakers in the big hall where you'll be meditating with other people, and you can hear the instructions relayed by this guy called Jian Goenka, who started this program Vipassana, and he explains and guides through the meditation. It's guided meditation only. Now this may sound simple when you say it, focus on your breath, but for me it was unbelievably difficult. I could not sit still for 10 minutes. My body was in pain almost immediately. My back hurt, my legs hurt, my knees hurt, my hips were hurting. My entire body felt like it was protesting against this demand for stillness. And if you're not used to sitting like that for a long time, this will happen. And every few minutes I wanted to open my eyes. I was trying to stretch and scratch my back, and I was also checking if others were also suffering like me. I was also checking if the time had moved. We think we know our body, but we mostly know the body as something that carries us from one task to another, sits in chairs, lies on beds, complains sometimes, but while trying to sit still, the body becomes very loud. Every ignored pain will begin to speak. And the thing was, there was no way to distract myself from it. After that early morning session at 4:30 to 6:30, breakfast comes at 6:30, and I have to say the break was actually really good. Maybe it felt amazing because I was super hungry and haven't eaten in 12 hours. But either way, the food became a huge emotional event in my day. Because when your ordinary pleasures are removed, food becomes your only comfort. After breakfast, there is a break, and during the break, you can nap or rest or walk in the designated areas. You can wash clothes or bathe and just sit somewhere. You still cannot talk when the rest has discipline inside it. Then again, there is meditation, again sitting, again instruction. We did around 10 hours of meditation every day with breaks after 1 hour, meals, rest periods. There was a lot of group settings. And in the evening, there is evening discourse. When people say 10 hours of meditation, they sometimes say it like a number. But the body does not experience it as a number. The body experiences it as one stretch of difficulty after another. By 8 a.m. in the morning, there is group meditation, then more meditation, lunch around 11 o'clock. 11 a.m. to 1 is lunch plus break. Then more meditation starts from 1, more scanning, more breathing, more observing. The tea break is at 5, which becomes the last food related moment of the day. And as a new student, you may get tea and some light food like fruit or snacks or popcorn, depending on the center. And I still remember eating a lot of those snacks because I knew this was the last thing before a long night without supper. And I would eat greedily. I would try to eat slowly. I would try to eat greedily because my body was already calculating the hunger that would come later. People may say that you are not eating dinner because the body rests better, the stomach rests throughout the night, you will not become sleepy or heavy. By the fifth day, I did feel that my body had somewhat understood the rhythm, that I was not going to have dinner, because after the struggle my stomach also adjusted. And when you wake up in the morning around 4 a.m., there is a certain kind of freshness, partly because you have not eaten anything, partly because your digestive system is not doing much of work, so it is also able to rest throughout the night. But the first few nights were extremely difficult. For the first 5 days, I could not sleep at all. By the second or third day, my mouth began to feel strange because I had not spoken to anyone. And by the third or fourth day, I caught myself humming, singing to myself during breaks. And then I realized something, that I had started missing my own voice. I had forgotten how I sounded like. And that was very unsettling. The thing is, we think speech is only for communication, but speech is also how we confirm ourselves to ourselves, how we hear our personality, how we process experience. When speech disappears, the mind becomes actually louder. And for someone like me, whose brain is already so noisy and full of arguments, that silence did not become peaceful immediately at all. My head had become crowded. And because there was no notebook, nowhere to write down, no phone, no conversation, no way to discharge my thoughts, I started craving writing almost as much as I was craving talking. This became especially intense during the evening discourses. Every evening around 7, we would sit and watch a recorded discourse by S.N. Goenka. There will be a TV and this guy would come, and this is all recorded in early 90s, late 90s and early 2000s. The guy had passed away a long time ago. He would come on TV, he would explain that day's practice, the difficulty that people might be experiencing, the theory behind the technique, ideas about suffering, about equanimity, about the larger worldview of Vipassana. And this is one of the key points of the video for me. For many people, these discourses, when he comes and philosophizes, these discourses may be very helpful because they provide context and reassurance, structure and language for what they're experiencing during the day. And I can understand that if you're doing an intense practice for 10 days, it can be useful to have someone explain what is happening, what the mind is doing, why the discomfort is arising, how the process works. There were moments when I wanted to pause the discourse. I wanted to write something down. I wanted to critically analyze and think about it and understand it more intellectually, because there were ideas that were sharp, and I am someone who processes life by thinking and writing. At the same time, I have to be honest that the evening discourse also triggered something in me. After an entire day of silence and bodily pain, no conversation, no books, nothing, and no real social processing, sitting in a room watching one teacher on TV, on screen, explain your entire inner experience through one framework felt very unsettling for me. I'm not saying it was propaganda in some objective legal sense. I'm not saying this is a cult or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that for me, in my body, with my politics, with my aversion to authority, with my sensitivity to social power, with my awareness of how closed environments work, it sometimes felt a little dogmatic, or at least it raised questions for me about how powerful any single explanatory framework can become when a person is sleep deprived, they are emotionally raw, they are socially isolated, they are physically exhausted. That is the nuance I want to hold. That's my point, because one person's structure can become another person's suffocation. One person's clarity can feel to someone else like an entering their mind at its most vulnerable moment. And for me, that was the tension throughout the 10 days. The practice was difficult enough, but the interpretation of the practice when this guy came on screen, who just given to me by every evening through this one voice, through one theory of suffering, through one moral psychology of craving and aversion, felt unsettling, because I am someone who is always alert to ideology. Even when ideology comes dressed as peace, I could not fully surrender to it. Maybe that is my limitation, maybe that is my strength, maybe both, I don't know. But I remember thinking, what happens when a group of people are placed in silence, deprived of ordinary communication? Physically, they're exhausted. They're asked to meditate for 10 hours a day. Then each evening receive a powerful explanation of their own mind from a recorded authority figure. And I am saying, as someone who has watched enough documentaries and read about group psychology to be alert about the possibility that any intense spiritual environment, even with sincere intentions and meaningful practices, can produce a certain kind of surrender in people. And I wanted to remain conscious of that. I also have to admit that the structure was not random. It was very well planned. There were assistant teachers present. There were opportunity to ask questions to the teacher at specific times. There were real two people sitting and always helping you with meditation in these halls. There were people who had clearly benefited from the practice too. I could see that. By the fourth day, the main Vipassana technique is introduced. From the fourth day onwards, you begin systematically observing bodily sensation throughout the body, basically scanning, noticing, trying to understand sensations as impermanent. And this is where the practice becomes even more difficult, because you are constantly watching pressure, tingling, discomfort, restlessness, sometimes nothing at all. And the instruction is to observe without reacting. But my mind would observe maybe, let's say, for 5 or 6 seconds, then run away into memories, arguments, to analysis, to boredom, to old conversations, everything except bodily sensation. This was the hardest part. Because a lot of language of meditation can make it sound like the mind is a lake that becomes still if you just sit beside it long enough. But my mind is like a railway station. It's like a WhatsApp group, a childhood memory archive all at once. By the fifth or sixth day, I was mentally gone. I was exhausted. I could sit longer. Yes, I could sit for maybe 20 or 30 minutes. First, for a few days, it was just 10 minutes. Then I had to stretch. That was an improvement, but internally I was struggling and the body pain had just quadrupled. And because writing was not allowed, I did something ridiculous. I found the laundry slips, the little pieces of paper meant for writing your room number and laundry items given by the Vipassana group, and I started writing notes on the back of them. I kept them in the pocket because I desperately needed to preserve some thoughts, some questions, some idea from the discourses and from my own experiences. That is probably against the spirit of the rules, and I'm not presenting as something you should imitate, but it tells you something about me. You remove my books, you remove my speech, but at some point my need to write will find a crack in the system. By the sixth day, old memories started coming up. Childhood memories, forgotten memories, random images from the past, things I had not thought about in years. And I found that interesting because when the mind is deprived of constant new input, maybe it begins opening old rooms. Maybe it starts throwing old material at you. Maybe the silence gives memory enough space to become visible again. And this is why I would be careful before recommending Vipassana casually to everyone, especially to people who are neurodivergent, especially people with anxiety, trauma histories, or intense mental struggles, or people who may not do well in rigid, silent, high control environments without proper support. For someone like me, it was extremely difficult. And if someone has significant mental health concerns, they should be honest in the application, speak to professionals if needed, and not treat a 10 days silent meditation course as a replacement for therapy or medication or community or medical support. Please don't do that. And that is perhaps what I realized the most there, the importance of community. By 9th and 10th day, I was craving speech. I was itching for this course to end. I really understood that time why monasteries exist, why communes, sanghas, and spiritual communities exist, because serious practice cannot be in isolation. It needs support. It needs shared human warmth. It needs people who can hold you when your mind begins to become too much. In that center, there were people around me, and because of the noble silence, they were not available as community in the ordinary sense. And that was one of the hardest things for me. I could see people around me struggling too. Some people seemed very serious and disciplined. Some people, I saw that they were also using their phones and were talking in their rooms. Some people left by the 4th or 5th day. In my memory, maybe 20 to 30% of the batch had left by the 4th day. And there is no shame in leaving something that your body or mind cannot handle. The idea that discipline is always proven by staying can become cruel if you forget that different bodies have different capacities. And by the 10th day, this noble silence was lifted, and I cannot explain how strange and beautiful that moment felt. There were people I had been sitting with in the hall for 10 days without speaking to them, without looking in their eyes, without knowing their names. And suddenly, when speech returned, it felt like we had known each other. It felt like we were one community, as if we had gone through something together without ever acknowledging it. Talking to my roommate after 10 days felt weirdly intimate. His name was Mahesh. He was from Andhra Pradesh. He was preparing for UPSC. And once people started talking, I realized that many participants were UPSC aspirants, or at least a surprising number in that batch were. And for them, this seemed to be this kind of reset or break from UPSC preparation, which honestly shocked me a little bit because I was thinking this is what UPSC people do for rest. I also met a lot of retired people, a lot of older people, married people, couples, foreigners, young people, people from different social worlds. And that was interesting because once the silence is lifted, the center suddenly became human again. People were cracking jokes, people were laughing out loud. The environment had completely turned around after the 10 days. I think that was one of the most beautiful parts of the course for me, the sudden return of the social. It made me realize how much I love people, even when I find people sometimes exhausting. It made me realize that I cannot become spiritual by deleting the social word. I need conversation, I need friendship, I need laughter, I need the ability to say, this is hard. I need someone to look at me and say, yes, this is hard for me too. On the final day, you do the closing formalities, you get your belongings, clean your room, and prepare to leave. And I remember one instruction, they said, leave the room better than you found it. And I found it beautiful. At the end, when you have packed up and everything, you have the option to donate. I donated, I remember, 1,000 rupees. And I heard that some people donate much larger amount, even lakhs. That's how much it is impacted them. That is how they fund the courses for future students. What did Vipassana do to me? For me, it was more like 10 days of being stripped of my usual escape and forced to notice how restless I am, how much pain my body carries, how much I rely on speech, how much I rely on writing, how much I need community, how quickly my mind resists authority, how hungry I can become, how irritated I can become, how badly I want to understand things intellectually when the instruction is to experience them directly. Those 10 days also taught me that pain is not only physical, because when you sit with pain long enough, it becomes very emotional, it becomes very psychological. Those 10 days taught me that hunger changes your relationship with time. It taught me that silence does not automatically mean peace. It taught me that discipline can be useful, but it also can feel suffocating depending on who you are and what your nervous system is like. It taught me that a practice can be meaningful and still deserve criticism. I'm not someone who can simply surrender to a framework because it is ancient or spiritual or delivered with authority. I survive on questions. I need language. I need doubt. I need conversation. I need to understand what power is doing in the room, even when the room is silent. Would I recommend Vipassana? I would say be careful. Go only if you understand that this is not a retreat in the casual sense, not a vacation, not a 10-day escape where you can relax in nature and come back refreshed. It can be very physically painful. It can be very mentally intense. It can bring up old memories and difficult emotions. It can make you feel very lonely. For some people, it can be transformative. For others, it may be too much. For me, it was both valuable and troubling, both disciplined and unsettling. And I think that is the only honest way I can speak about it. As someone who went there with a fried brain after quitting a job, sat through hunger and pain and silence, struggled to observe his breath even for 5 seconds, secretly wrote notes on laundry slips, felt uneasy watching one recorded discourse explain everything every evening, missed his own voice, missed other people, watched old memories return, learned where his body hurt, left the center and came back with no grand enlightenment, but with one clear understanding that silence is full of everything you have avoided. Sometimes when the world becomes silent enough, the first thing you hear is not peace at all, it is pain.